Hey everyone, welcome back to Kingmaker. Today it's Alejino, one of the co-hosts of the podcast, and I'm gonna be starting a new series called DeFi Education. So I was teasing a couple weeks ago about DeFi education and what I wanted to do. I've gotten a lot of good recommendations from people that one direction that we could go with Kingmaker is try to educate people on DeFi and different concepts and make easy to get into just because there isn't a lot of a structured way to learn DeFi at the moment, and there's a lot of different concepts that go into it, and you have to do a lot of research. At least that's how it was for me, and not a lot of people are willing to go through that. So and that's why I'm here today to try to cover it and make this a little like podcast series where it will be easier to consume, and then hopefully in YouTube I could go and make slides and have slides in the background as I talk about this. So it's a mix of like a YouTube video slash like podcast episode, if that makes sense. So that's the plan. And if it evolves, I'll do an update on our Twitter or something. But that's what we're gonna be rolling with for now. So while this podcast is going to make information easy to consume and simple to find, one thing that we're trying to make to help you out is our website. So we know we're content creators and entertainers. So if we do attract a big audience, we made a website so our audience members can go and learn about different concepts for free. We're going to provide tools and provide educational materials that we find online and that we create ourselves on the website, and in that way you have everything in one place to find it. And since we're constantly in the crypto community and this is kind of what we've been doing for a living for the past few months or so, we're going to be up to date with it and update it over time. That's the goal, at least so far. So what I'm going to be going into first is telling you what I'm covering today. So I'm going to be telling you like where to begin and start off the journey and what to look out for. So as you guys know, in DeFi, there's always going to be really like interesting projects, and there's going to be really interesting people that are involved in the process and builders that you may want to follow. But one thing to remind you is that you should never treat any of these builders as a god, because as we've seen in the past, or if you're new here, there's been builders in the past that have been treated as a god, and they got a cult following and they got absolutely wrecked. So you should always do your own research, make your own decisions and opinions about protocols, and see if your opinion on them or what you see their value is matches with what you're looking for. Some tips of advice that I have for people that trying to stay on top and make good investing decisions and stay up to date with what they decide to follow is, of course, Twitter. There's every protocol has their own personal Twitter that they do announcements of what's going on, and and you can do notifications to get updates from them. But also as well, there are a couple of crypto educators to help you like educate on different like topics that gained a good reputation. One famous one as an example is Crypto Condom. He's huge on Twitter, but there's also others. And another thing you could do is also follow the builders themselves. Sometimes I've noticed that they may leak alpha or something on their own personal Twitter instead of the company or DAO Twitter, but that's a couple things to do. Another thing you could do to stay on top of protocols and try to see alpha or try to find some like hidden potential is just by like learning as much as you can about them. So that's simply by going to their docs or reading like threads on them, or you can also go on our website, our Kingmaker website, and you can learn on different topics and on different DAOs, see what they could offer, and like try to use your imagination or your financial literacy, like your knowledge on financial concepts, to see like, oh, what can this evolve to, or who can build on top of them to like unlock further potential. Making smart investing decisions and deciding what's worthwhile and what's trash is a skill, just like how trading is a skill. These are skills that you get over time with practice, with knowledge, and with experience, and that's something that no one can do for you. There's no shortcut for that. That's something you have to do yourself through hard work and dedication. Like I thought that I'm dumb and an idiot in these topics, yet I talk to normies or I talk to people that's beginning or fellow builders, and they even complimented me for my knowledge, and that's just because I try to research, just because I like what I do, and I tried to start this Kingmaker podcast so I can educate other people as well. But that comes with hard work, and you can get to my point, just like I could get to a builder, like a giant builder's knowledge, if I do enough hard work in the long run. So I think this is a good segue to lead to the beginning of DeFi. Not the beginning. I'm not doing a history lesson, but teaching you like what overall what it is, the ideology or the concept they're trying to achieve, and start from there. This is, like I said, we're gonna start from easy topics and go up in difficulty and different topics over time. So if you already know about all this or you don't need this, then just skip to a further episode. But I'm gonna start with the definition of DeFi and go up from there. So what's DeFi? So DeFi is known as decentralized finance. So what they're trying to do is provide, well, I guess I would give you the proper definition, is financial products and services on public blockchains, enabling anyone to use financial services anywhere. And you're in charge of your own services, you're in charge of your own funds, and you do whatever you want. You make your own decisions, and in that way, you have the responsibility of what happens to you. This is appealing to a lot of people just because with the current banking system, you deposit your money into the bank and they go and they deposit your money elsewhere to make interest on it, and they give you a small portion of that. And as people know nowadays, interest rate is ridiculously low and doesn't even cover inflation. That's something that's really sad, and a lot of people are not happy about that. So a lot of people have been leaning towards DeFi, and DeFi is trying not to be dependent on central entities or central authorities. And by doing that, they enable, instead you just cut out the middleman and you go directly to like the surface, or you earn the income. So let's say instead they're doing option strategies to earn money, you cut the middleman out and you get the profit, and that just makes it like simpler on you. And you do have to do a little bit more work, but it makes it simpler for you to get the profit that banks would do. It makes that a lot simpler. Throughout this podcast on the YouTube, I'm between different slides with examples or try to make it simpler to add like visual concepts, images, etc. to make it easier to learn. But like, there's still things in DeFi that they can do passively and have it in the background that are still really good. Like for example, Beefy Finance is known like auto compounder. You could just have it running in the background and you don't have to do anything else once you deposit in there. And there's other concepts like that, and there's other like passive ways to earn income on your investments in anything, like probably options or other things as well. You just have to go look for it and set it up initially, and then the rest you just leave it there until you're ready to take it out. So talking about that, you have to decide what type of investor you are for the long term, or like what type of strategy you want to do. And from what I've seen, there's usually 3 types of investors and 3 types of people with the way they treat their money. There's long-term investors, short-term investors, and traders. And each one has their benefits and each one can make money, but you have to understand how difficult it is. So for example, traders are really popular on social media. There's all these people saying they make a lot of money, but trading is a skill. That's something you have to hone and craft, and you are definitely going to lose money initially learning and everything you're going to be giving to whales. But long term, the concept behind it is that you're going to be doing smarter financial decisions when you learn from your mistakes and make more money. And it's things like that. Or short-term traders or investors, they know a narrative is like really popular. They know like a big announcement's going to come, so they invest in it, wait a month or 2 or something like that, and or a certain time horizon, and then they profit from it, and then they sell on the news. And like long-term traders are people that do research on an investment or on a protocol or something, and they believe it has a long-term future. They see like the potential certain market has, and they decide that they want to put their money on it. They believe in it and they invest in it, and they hold for a long period of time, for like a year or more, because they believe it's going to do well long term. Each one has a risk, and each one is going to have their positive and negatives, and that's something you have to decide for yourself. And you can buy into any narrative. So any, like what I mean by narrative is like, for example, there's going to be a bunch of different infrastructure in DeFi, things that's needed to make it run. And just like in stocks where you can invest in infrastructure, you can do the same thing in DeFi. But which one you do is up to you. Which team you want to support is up to you. So you have to begin with learning the infrastructure, how each one differ, and which protocol specialize in, and then you have to make the decision yourself on what to do long term or short term or whatever you decide to do. So before I start talking about infrastructure, I'm just gonna go over really quickly what's the appeal of DeFi. So I broke it down to 3 simple things. So with 1, you be your own bank. With 2, you earn on your financial assets just like a bank would, and you cut out the middleman. And 3, you're in control of your financial assets. You make the decision of what you want to do, what you feel comfortable with, and you have access to your cash, and you're not letting anyone in control of your cash. That's what we're trying. That's the main appeal with DeFi and why people At least I think people get into it. With that being said and done, I'm going to be going over some of the places I think you should start out in your journey. And I will really quickly go over the definitions just so you don't have to. And then you could dive deeper into all the different protocols that are involved in this category. So a part of some DeFi infrastructure are AMMs, DEXs, and lending like structures, protocols, etc. And some examples of that is Curve, Aave, and 1inch. So the first definition I'm going over is what's a DEX. So a DEX is a decentralized exchange that does peer-to-peer transactions or a marketplace where you trade crypto in a non-custodial manner. An aggregator offers assets exchanges at the best rate on the market. Different protocols may work differently though, so keep that in mind. An example would be 1inch and CalSwap, but 1inch falls in this category. So basically they route through supported DEXs, and in 1inch case, it may be like Uniswap, Curve, and Balancer as an example, amongst others. An example of a lending structure would be Aave, and one is a lending structure that is different than Aave would be something like Silo. Lending structure is basically you deposit collateral and you borrow stablecoin or some token against it, and depending on the health ratio, you may get liquidated. Of course, there's lending protocols that have different structures, the way to lend against your collateral, and there's probably some that you don't get liquidated on, that's unliquidatable, but that's something we're not covering in this topic at the moment or in this video. So lending structures, lending and DEXs, each different protocol may have it working differently in a different manner. And in that way, so yes, you can learn what the definition of lending is, but something like Aave and Silo, they work completely different in the back end. You end up being able to lend, yes, but they may have like different collaterals that they accept because of how the mechanism works in the back end and the different risk factors that each one has. But that's something for you to do further research on. One thing I will say, as an example, if you want to look more into it or wait until we release another video or podcast, would be Aave has shared pools. Why, if I remember correctly, Silo had isolated pools. They have isolated pools that communicate with each other, which is two different ways of doing lending. With that being said, I'm not going to go any further in the topic just because I don't want to have this video be too long. This is supposed to be introductory into DeFi. So those are some beginning DeFi infrastructure topics that you can look into further, and I provided some examples of some you can look into. Just to remember, we do have like 15 different DAOs in our website that you can do research on, all with different articles, YouTube videos, and like podcasts and Twitter threads that you can look at to learn more. The next segment is I'm going to be talking more in detail about what type of information you should be looking for and what to learn and hone your skills at over time. So the first one I'm be talking about is tokenomics. So one thing I want to make a clear point on is that when you're looking at DeFi, there's going to be different cases where you're going to see a really good product. They made a really good product and they have product market fit, but they have really shit tokenomics. So almost every single protocol decide they need a token, or every single product in DeFi decide, oh, we might as well have a token, which I'm not going to say if that's a good or not in this video, but basically that usually ends up being the case. And with that means that each team decides to do the tokenomics the way they do or model it after a previously done protocol. And one thing to know is that just because one set of rules worked for one protocol doesn't mean it's going to work for yours. And another thing to know is that if the teams, if they do decide to like tweak it or make their own model, they can mess it up and it may make it really, really bad or not appealing to retail or people long term if you actually look at the math and the use cases behind it. Next point that I'm going to be going over is supply/distribution. So this is something you should keep in mind because some examples that happened is that, let's say a protocol goes and every team needs funding or every team needs money to build, just because like builders need to pay rent, have food to eat, etc. And it's really hard to do like build a whole product by yourself. So a lot of times they need to hire people to help them out, and that's fine. But a lot of times they go only sell like a ridiculously high amount of the token distribution. So let's say your token has 1 million tokens and you sell 25% of the shares to some fund. So that means at some point in the future they can sell and they could dump their whole stack onto retail, and that's something that could be really scary and intimidating for people because 25% is a lot, and that's besides like team allocation and other stuff, etc. So that's something to not look forward to, look at, because that could be something that could be really detrimental and be that may scare off investors. So you just may be holding the token, waiting to be dumped on. The next section that I'll be going over, not section, the next point I'll be going over is that things to look out for is when you're investing in DeFi is that you should look at what type of yield that you're receiving. So one example is that, let's say you have a product, there's a product I really like and they have a token, and the only way they give back yield is in emissions. That should be a no-go. That should be a red flag for you. That's completely useless. If they say they don't give back revenue to the token, then the token is basically useless and it has no real value. Well, I'm making like a generalized like line here, but like in most cases, that's the case. So something I would recommend is that if they give back yield, or what people are starting to call real yield, as in blue chip tokens such as Ethereum, Bitcoin, or like a stable coin like USDC or DAI, and that's something I want to make clear. So that's something you should look out for. So if they only have emissions, then that's really bad sign, and you should try to steer away from that. Another thing to look out for when you're deciding what to invest in is that you should see, this is kind of like a broad term, but kind of like network effect. So what do I mean by that? So a network effect is that one thing that you have to keep in mind is there's no point having a product if no one cares or uses it, and that's something to keep in mind. So one example, let's say DopeX. A lot of people in the beginning complained that DopeX is really complicated, that who really uses it, etc. But one thing that you can see now is that they're being integrated in a bunch of protocols that say GMX and Paraswap or whatever else. I don't like that. They're being integrated to a lot of projects. They're being a part of, there are people building on top of them. And let's say you look at Dune Analytics, which is a tool to see different numbers for protocols, and you see they're attracting more users or more TVL, then you say, oh, okay, they're obviously getting a network effect. There more people are using them, or they're being involved in the process of DeFi. They're being essential for DeFi to work. An example of that is, let's say, Curve. So Curve, for example, they have a really big network effect. For the longest time, people like would complain that, oh, the emissions were trash and everything before they got the snowball going, and now at this point they're basically, everyone sees them as the number one place to trade stablecoins in any amount and have really good peg. And even in like the worst case scenarios and in the really bad conditions, if you play the game or copy like a team strategy, then even your stable coin will have like a really good peg. A lot of things I'm saying is broad because I'm introducing a bunch of topics in this initial episode, but basically network effect is something like you build over time and you get a snowball effect. Like you start, it may be slow, it may not look that interesting, that appealing, that who uses them, or what's the point if no one uses it. But then over time, if any product or any team can get like a snowball effect, then their products could be more useful, they're going to bring more value, and they're going to be more integral to the DeFi ecosystem, and they're going to be like a foundational product that teams are going to use and build on in the long term. So another thing, this is going to be the fifth point, and it's going to be basically the team behind a project. So one thing to keep in mind is that when you're looking at a project and you look at the team who are building or are part of it, the anons involved, is that you should see if they gained a good reputation of being trustworthy. Because one thing to know in DeFi is that being anonymous means that you have to earn a good reputation, that you have to show that you are a good, trustworthy person. And just like recently, we saw that even a doxed person can rug a protocol. They could show just because if they show their face or not doesn't mean the person's trustworthy. So you have to see if like how the person behaves, their personality, if they seem smart. Like you look at Charlie maybe X from GMX or maybe DeFi Alpha, and you're like, oh shit, this person is really smart, they have a big brain, and then you're like, okay, I can back myself. Or like in my case, I'd say I talked to DeFi Alpha extensively for like a week or two, and I saw he was a really smart person. He works really well with people, he's a good leader, and like for example, that in that case for me is like that's someone that I think I can like back long term. But like I'm in the position where I could talk to people one-on-one and you're not, but you could see from like their Twitter, Discord conversations, etc., that if that's something you or that's a team or members you can back long term. So the sixth and final point that I'm going to be doing on the podcast is their goal and narrative. So every product that's out in DeFi is trying to like tackle a problem or tackle a certain market, and you have to go see for yourself if that's something you believe in. So in this case, that Curve became really good at stablecoins. That's one of the essential parts that they're at, and of course they're adding different things like, let's say, like volatile pools and stuff like that. But stablecoins is their bread and butter, right? So if you believe, for example, stablecoins is going to be really large, there's going to be a lot of stablecoins in DeFi, that not everyone's going to invest in something. People are just going to have stablecoins and like use DeFi as kind of like a savings account, as you will. Then, for example, Curve, maybe you may see it as like a good investment, stuff like that. So you have to see what's their goal and narrative of what they want to achieve, and see, does that align with what you think is going to be massive long term, and do they have a realistic chance of making that happen? That's about it of what I want to cover today. I really hope you found this useful. I'm trying to keep this episode short because I don't want to make it too long, because then you're gonna just lose attention. So I'm gonna try to make it between 20 to 30 minutes. If this is something that you enjoyed, please press the like button, and you're in Spotify, please give us 5 stars. If you want to learn more, go subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on whatever podcast platform that you're using, and check out the different ways to support us. We're on Gitcoin Grants. We have a Patreon. We have different ways to support us. We have affiliate links and probably in the description or something. So if that's something that interests you, go check us out. And I really hope you liked the video. Special thanks to Curve Finance. Thank you for giving us the grant. You helped make this possible, and I really hope you go check out Curve. If you want to go learn more about Curve, they're in our website, and we're going to be making YouTube videos on them soon. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you come back for more.